Tell me when.
Okay, you can go.
Okay. Aloha and welcome to this evening's presentation on plans to implement HR33 concerning Maunakea Working Group. This is one of a series of presentations done by the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus in line with its objective of educating our members, the Democratic Party of Hawaii, and the public on Native Hawaiian programs, services, and issues. This particular topic is being covered today to prepare members to give testimony and for the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in the nomination process on HB 33 HD1. A copy of which will be shared via Zoom was adopted by the House of Representatives. The resolution calls for a working group to be convened to develop recommendations building on the findings of the independent evaluation of the implementation of the Maunakea Comprehensive Management Plan for a new governance and management structure for Maunakea that collaboratively engages with all stakeholders, particularly the Native Hawaiian community. The working group is to consist of the following membership. One member to be appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives to serve as the chairperson of the working group to facilitate the group to develop a consensus. 2, 3 members of the House of Representatives to be appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. 3, 7 members who are Native Hawaiian to be nominated by Native Hawaiian groups, organizations, or communities, and appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. 4, 1 representative from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. 5, 1 representative from the Board of Land and Natural Resources. 6, 1 representative from the University of Hawaii Board of Regents. And 7, 1 respective from Maunakea observatories. And on legislative measures initiated and adopted by the House of Representatives. So as to be correctly informed, we invited Rep. David Tarnas, the introducer of HR 33 HD1 and House Committee Chair of Water and Land, which specifically focuses on the scope of programs relating to global warming, changing weather patterns, climate adaptation to the actual or expected impacts of climate change, and land and water resource administration and use, coastal lands, the Land Use Commission, County Land Use Planning and Zoning, the Hawaii Community Development Authority, infrastructure development, outdoor recreation, drinking water, and brackish waters, small boat harbors and their infrastructure, state parks, historic sites, development and protection, ocean activities and outdoor marine matters, the Coastal Zone Management Act, and other pertinent matters referred to it by the House. In addition, we've also invited to our forum Rep. Mark Nakashima, House Committee Chair of Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, whose judiciary scope shall be those programs relating to the people of Hawaii and the courts, crime prevention and control, penal code, criminal enforcement, prosecution, sentencing, disposition and punishment, probation, parole, furlough, and other alternatives to incarceration, indigent legal representation and defense matters, civil law, firearms, weapons, judicial and legal questions, constitutional matters, the Attorney General, the judiciary, individual rights, civil rights and liberties, and the Civil Rights Commission, and persons of Hawaiian ancestry, including programs administered by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and other pertinent matters concerning Hawaiians referred to it by the House. The HAC Forum is meant to give us the background and rationale for their proposal. I will note that the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus has not taken a position on this issue. Currently, we are at the information gathering stage. Also, the general membership meeting of the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus, typically included for tonight, will be deferred to our June 23rd, 2021 general membership meeting at 6 p.m. Actually, that's been changed to April. So we'll be doing it in April, the 14th. And to allow our caucus and their members to be fully informed and included in understanding the process of this opportunity to participate in the Maunakea Working Group nominations. Let me now introduce Benton Pang, Hawaiian Affairs Caucus Secretary Treasurer, who will advise us of the ground rules for participation in this educational forum. Go ahead, Benton.
Hello, Chair. Aloha. Here are some ground rules to keep us organized within the 60 minutes allowed for this evening's program and to be respectful to our speakers and members. During the presentation by the speakers, everyone will be muted. However, we encourage questions to be written in the chat room. The moderator will be asking some questions, followed by questions being taken from the chat box during the Q&A period that will follow the presentations. Please respect that the chat box will be used for questions only. Please do not use it to criticize or mock anyone. This is an educational forum, and we ask everyone to respect that purpose. If after the presentation there are remaining questions that could not be answered during the remaining time, please forward them to Rep Nakashima at capital.hawaii.gov or Rep Tarnas at capital.hawaii.gov. This Zoom presentation will be recorded and live streamed to the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus Facebook page. If you do not wish to be seen or heard, mute your video and audio. If you fail to do so, we will not be responsible for your being seen or heard on our recording. Your identification and questions in the chat box will be seen by others. A video recording of this presentation will be uploaded to our website, hawaiianaffairs.org, in a few days. Chair.
Thank you, Benton. Okay, so again, our moderator for this evening is Mauna Bernardino, Chair of the Legislative Committee of the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus. She and Benton Pang will monitor the chat room for questions following the presentation. Go ahead, Mauna.
Aloha, everyone. We are pleased to introduce our first guest speaker this evening, Representative David Tarnas, Chairman of the House Committee on Water and Land. Representative Tarnas is currently the state representative for House District 7, which is North Kohala, South Kohala, and North Kona. And he has previously served as the state representative for Kohala and Kona from 1994 to 1998. He has lived in the district for over 32 years with his wife, Carolyn Stewart, raised 2 children who are currently at college. David is a professional environmental planner with his own company focused on managing development of private residential and commercial projects in environmentally sensitive areas, including planning, impact analysis, permitting, compliance, monitoring, reporting, government, and community relations. For more than 2 decades, David has worked as a planner and meeting facilitator on projects in Hawaii to develop harbors, highways, farms, ranches, fish ponds, and forest plantations, as well as scientific research facilities and renewable energy projects. He is co-author of the Hawaii Ocean Resources Management Plan, co-founding board member of Maunakea Foundation, former UHC grant extension agent for West Hawaii, and author of the 1998 Law Act 306 that created the West Hawaii Regional Fishery Management Area. He has served as a member of the Hawaii County Agriculture Advisory Commission and the Community Advisory Group for the U.S. Army Garrison, Hawaii, Pohakuloa Training Area, and Hawaii County Chairman of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. Welcome, Representative Tarnas.
Thank you very much, Mona, and thank you to Chair Juanita Kawamoto for inviting me today, and thank you to the members of the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus in the Democratic Party of Hawaii for gathering today to talk about this very important issue. I want to acknowledge and give a big mahalo nui to the residents of Hawaii House District 7, North and South Kohala and North Kona, for their confidence in me as their state representative to advocate for their interests in the State House. As Mona mentioned, I served in the State House 25 years ago, and I was honored to have that opportunity. I took 20 years off from legislative work in order so that my wife and I could raise our 2 children in a relatively normal household and not one where I was gone all the time. And now they're out in the world pursuing their dreams. And so my whole family agreed that I could come back and serve again in the legislature. And I'm grateful to the residents of House District 7 to re-elect me to serve. And I'm grateful to the Speaker of the House and the leadership to ask me to serve as the chair of the Water and Land Committee in the House, which is a very important committee. Chair Kawamoto had described the scope of work, and it's a significant scope of work, all the water and land issues in the House, in the state. And that's our INA. That's really what we are as a people are most connected to. And so all of the policy issues related to water and land are ones that come through the Water and Land Committee. Among those issues, of course, is a very important issue related to the management of Maunakea. Maunakea is of paramount importance to my district and my constituents in the district. I represent the area that is on the slopes of Maunakea and adjacent district, which is the district of Representative Mark Nakashima, who will be joining us, that includes the summit. In my district, we have residents who are active participants in the life of Maunakea. They are stakeholders in all of the policy issues related to Maunakea. Native Hawaiians, whether they be cultural practitioners, they are hunters, astronomers, people of all different ethnicities who are actively part of the life of Maunakea. And it really is a diverse group of people, and I represent all of them. I represent people who were on the slopes of Maunakea, exercising their rights of protest against further development on the mountain. And I also represent residents who are actively engaged and employed in the business of science and resource management on the mountain. There are 2 headquarters of observatories that are in Waimea, my hometown, the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope and the W.M. Keck Observatory. And I also, as I say, have constituents who have been the leaders among the Kia'i, who are the folks who have been actively engaged in opposing the construction of a proposed new telescope on the mountain, the 30-meter telescope. Personally, I've been involved in environmental issues and land use issues for my entire work life in Hawaii. I'm an environmental planner by profession, and I'm keenly aware of the challenges of balancing development and protection of environmental and cultural resources. And I have been involved in projects that have been challenging for the community to be able to decide what is the way to proceed. And so, and that has ranged from everything from establishing protected areas in our coastal environment to building new highways, to expanding our commercial harbors. And so I come to this job as the chair of the Water and Land Committee with that experience and that sense of kuleana, that sense of responsibility to represent the interests of all of the different constituents in our community. And so to the issue that we have before us here, I introduced House resolution and House concurrent resolution related to Maunakea and establishing a working group to evaluate the different governance structures for management of Maunakea. I introduced these resolutions in response to a challenge really placed on us by the Speaker of the House, Speaker Scott Psyche, who in his speech to the House of Representatives threw down the gauntlet and said that he felt that the University of Hawaii has not really fulfilled its full responsibility in managing the resources and the lands of Mauna Kea as well as it should be. And he challenged us to find a different path forward and evaluate other governance structures for the mountain. So I introduced these resolutions in response to that. As a planner, my job is to figure out how to move forward and find a path that will address the issues that are facing our community about these proposed uses and existing uses of the mountain. We all know that there are many observatories already on the mountain, and they are faced with the issue of how to plan their future. And the University of Hawaii is currently doing its work, an environmental impact statement, a comprehensive management plan update, and a master plan update in order to request the Board of Land and Natural Resources to extend its lease on the mountain. That is going on right now. And Greg Chun, who is the lead person for the University of Hawaii in its office for Mauna Kea stewardship, he presented a report to the Board of Land and Natural Resources recently, just maybe 6 weeks ago, where he presented an update on their work so far to date to update the comprehensive management plan and the master plan. And in that report, he identified that there were 5 different governance models for the mountain. And he briefly described all of them in his report. And he said that the university really is only pursuing and evaluating one of them, which is where they are the master lessee. And Greg Chun mentioned to the board saying that the other 4 governance models are ones that we are not evaluating because we're a biased party as the university. And so he left it up to others to evaluate that. So I foresee that the working group established by these resolutions that the House of Representatives has authorized by adopting these resolutions, I see that these working groups should evaluate these other governance models that were identified by the university and other ones that this working group might identify. We should look at these to be able to figure out what is the best way for us to move forward in managing this public trust resource that is of significant importance to all of Hawaii, including the Native Hawaiian community. And we have a responsibility as legislators to address this issue. And so that is what these resolutions are all about, is to fulfill that responsibility. Chair Juanita Kawamoto described the working group and the membership on that. What I am asking is for those Native Hawaiian leaders in our community who feel that it would be something they could do, for them to be nominated to serve on this working group and be part of this process of evaluating these different governance models. I must say that I developed the language for these resolutions in consultation with a number of different Native Hawaiian leaders in our community, some of whom were very actively involved in the Kia'i and a protest on the mountain against the TMT. And so I'm seeking the counsel, and this working group is seeking the counsel of the Native Hawaiian community. I think I've reached the end of my time, so I want to wrap up there. I'd be happy to talk more about it, but that's the basis of these resolutions. It's the basis of my own motivation for introducing these resolutions. And Chair, I think I should wrap it up there, and I'd be happy to respond to questions moving forward and I leave it to you to guide our discussion going forward in this forum.
If I may jump in, Juanita, we are expecting Representative Mark Nakashima as well, but he hasn't come on board. So what I'd like to do, if everyone is okay with it, is start with questions for Representative David Tarnas. And please put your questions in the chat box. Benton will be monitoring that and bring the questions forward. And so to start you off, David, you said we can call you David.
Yes, of course, please do. And just so everyone knows, I'm just a regular guy. I live in Waimea, you know, I've been there for decades, and, you know, I don't really need to stand on ceremony. So I used to be very active as chair of the Hawaii County Democratic Party and worked with many of you. And so I told Mauna, just call me David. So don't stand on ceremony. It's okay. So please, Mauna,
Okay,
proceed.
so here's the first question while we're waiting for others to put questions in the chat box. How was it decided that these positions or people would comprise the working group? And how will you ensure that the selection of Native Hawaiians is fair?
We worked on this language of the resolution and the composition of this itself in close consultation with a number of Native Hawaiian leaders, as I say, many of whom were very involved in organizing and part of the Kia'i group on the mountain. And so it was really in consultation with them that we came up with this description and how we were to do it. Initially, I was going to name different groups, and we were strongly advised against that because we didn't want to preclude and predetermine who was to be involved. But we decided that they would be Native Hawaiian. First, what we did is we divided the group so it would be, we had a number of different state representatives, whether from the legislature or from OHA, the Board of Regents, the Board of Land and Natural Resources. And so we had our list of who would be there, who were part of representing organizations, the observatories, for example, OHA, for example. And then we also said, well, we need to have as many Native Hawaiian leaders who could represent their own constituency, and that they would be nominated by Native Hawaiian organizations, Native Hawaiian communities, Native Hawaiian groups. So it was rather loosely defined, but the goal is to have these Native Hawaiian organizations and groups and communities nominate individuals. We knew that there would be a lot more people nominated than there would be room for, because we didn't want to have a huge group on the working group. And so after consultation with our collaborators, we decided that the speaker would choose who they would be. in order to make sure that they are representative of the Native Hawaiian community. Personally, I am advocating that everybody, as much as possible, be from the island of Hawaii. I would like the Board of Trustees from OHA and the Board of Regents member and all the folks who are representing government agencies be from Hawaii Island. I would hope that the Native Hawaiian leadership would be mostly from Hawaii Island because it's our kuleana, it's our responsibility. So the goal is to have it be balanced and that the chair be a facilitator who could work as a neutral party to build consensus within the group.
Okay, I'm going to go to the chat box. We have a question from Melody Aduha. It's several questions wrapped up together. Her question is, when does the UH lease end and when is it subject to renewal? When is the EIS due? When is the master plan due? Is the UH report available for review? And what are the other 4 plans?
You know, the UH report is certainly available. I'd be happy to send it to you. It's available on the Board of Land and Natural Resources website on their agenda meeting in, I don't remember the date, but it's part of the attachment to the Board of Land and Natural Resources meeting when Greg Chun presented his report. It was actually the same meeting that we had the presentation by the independent evaluation of the management plan of Maunakea. So that's all in the same BLNR agenda item, so it's available there. And if you want, I could send it to you, Mona, or to Juanita so that you could share it with your members so they could get access to it.
All right.
And in that report, it lays out all the details about the schedule for the UH. I understand that they are working first to update their comprehensive management plan and their master plan before they focus on the environmental impact statement. But in Greg Chun's report to the land board, he laid out that calendar, and I would refer you to his report to get the details on that. And I think that the land board, actually that's all recorded, so you could actually look at the video of that meeting and get the details of that, as well as the question and answer from the land board members.
Thank you. We have a question from Gloria Borland. Can the person representing the astronomy industry be Native Hawaiian? For example, a Hawaiian scientist?
Absolutely. It all depends on the Mauna Kea observatories and who they nominate. And if you know of a Native Hawaiian astronomer that you think would be the best person, please encourage them to offer their services to the Mauna Kea observatories. The people I've been working with, who are the main representatives that are working with the legislature on this, the primary person is Rich Matsuda, who is with the Keck Observatory. So if you have a specific name of someone who you think should be the person, I'd say encourage them to talk to Rich Matsuda at Keck. But for most of the work we've been doing, Rich has been the main I mean, Doug Simons was the other person who has been involved, and he's with Canada, France, Hawaii Telescope, but Rich has been the primary person. So Gloria, if you have an idea, encourage them to talk to Rich Matsuda, because the organization really needs to nominate the person.
Thank you. In looking over the testimony in favor and opposed to these resolutions, the observatories felt that they should have more representation than just 1 seat. What do you think about that?
You know, I acknowledge that they would like that, but that we did not feel, I did not feel, and my colleagues at the House did not feel that that was the best way to go. I mean, from my view, you know, the university has expressed and acknowledged its challenge of providing voice to the Native Hawaiian community in this process. And that I see this working group as serving the purpose of providing a voice to the Native Hawaiian community. I wanted at least one person from the observatories to be there, as well as a person from the university and from the land board, so that they could hear the voice of the Native Hawaiian community as provided by the membership, which is half of this working group. So while the observatories did ask for more representation, the House of Representatives decided that was not appropriate, and we kept it at one.
Thank you. We have a question from Nina Key. How do you plan to facilitate these Native Hawaiian group or community nomination/voting?
So I'm hoping that we have active participation from the Native Hawaiian community, and that the Native Hawaiian groups and communities and organizations will nominate people to serve on the working group. And then the Speaker of the House will need to look at all of those individuals and select 7 of them who will serve on the working group. And so all of this really depends on people stepping forward and being willing to serve. I mean, this will not be an easy job. This is a challenging topic, and it's putting yourself in a position where you have to speak your mana'o and you have to listen to others. But we knew that there would be more people who want to participate than there will be places in the working group. So the Speaker will need to be the one to narrow it down to just the 7 who will serve. And I will certainly work with him, and I know he has other Native Hawaiian leaders who will advise him on this selection process.
Okay, our next question is about funding. Is any funding being allocated for the working group? Will they have staff?
So this is a resolution, and as a legislative measure, resolutions have no funding attached to it. This question has come up because my personal opinion as a professional facilitator is that I would like to see a facilitator be somebody that is a professional, and we may have to provide compensation for that individual. The Speaker has said that if necessary, he would seek to get outside funding to be able to provide for that. But there is no funding as part of the resolution, because that's something we can't do. But the Speaker has said that if necessary, he would seek outside funding to be able to compensate a neutral facilitator to facilitate the group.
The reason this question is being asked is you might recall a couple years ago, the legislature passed a law about a commission to oversee the prison system, and the governor has not funded that commission with the staff, so they can't move forward. So if there's no funding, how will you ensure that this working group can move forward?
Yes, well, I appreciate that because I serve on the Corrections and Military Affairs Committee, and we just passed a bill to provide funding for that oversight committee because it was, I mean, that's a little off topic, but let me just say that the administration chose not to release the funds that the legislature had appropriated for that oversight commission. The legislature felt that that commission needed funding, and we appropriated the money. The governor chose not to release that money, and I think that was a mistake. So we actually just approved a bill that would provide appropriation for that Judicial Oversight Commission, because you need to have support. So in this, the Maunakea Working Group, while there is no funding attached to it, there is the commitment from the Speaker to seek outside funding to pay for the facilitator. And each of us as legislators have one person who works with us, and as needed, I will certainly have my chief of staff work to provide assistance to the staffing of this working group. And so whether we get outside funding or not, I do have access to staff support that would assist us in this matter.
Okay, we have a question from Pohai Ryan. Why does the legislature insist on keeping management with UH? They have proven time and time again to be neglectful and disrespectful of the Mauna. Are the empty buildings being dismantled, and when?
First, I gotta say, how's it, Pohai? Good to see you. Oh, I can't see you, but good to hear from you. I appreciate your question, and I think, you know, this whole resolution came out of the speaker saying that he didn't think the university should continue as the master lessee for the mountain. And so I think the speaker is voicing skepticism that's shared by folks across the state. Not everybody, because there are those folks who think the university has done a much better job in the last 10 years than they did previously. And I have to acknowledge that. The university has done a lot of work to improve the way that they have managed the mountain and improve the way they have engaged with the Native Hawaiian community. And I acknowledge the good work that Greg Chun has done, Kahuku Mauna, the Office of Maunakea Management. And so I think that they have come a long way in improving the way they manage the mountain. That being said, the speaker has said that he wants to evaluate other governance structures that do not have the university being the master lessee. And so that's really the charge of this working group, is to evaluate those other models. The existing observatories, they are trying, all they want is some certainty for the future so that they can figure out how they move forward and how they can continue their work on the mountain. I have to emphasize that this resolution is not about the 30-meter telescope. This is really about governance of Mauna Kea. We have existing observatories that are there. We need to figure out how to manage the mountain so that all the stakeholders are properly represented. The cultural and historical practices on Mauna Kea are allowed and protected. And so I think, Pohai, the university, the legislature has not decided that the university should continue. Rather, the legislature, the House of Representatives, has said that this working group needs to look at alternative governance structures for Mauna Kea, so that the land board has that recommendation from this working group, which will be completed by the end of this year, to make a decision about whether the university should continue as the master lessee or not. So that's not a foregone conclusion.
All right, how about the second half of her question? Are the empty buildings being dismantled, and when?
Yes. Yeah, so decommissioning is a huge issue. And Hokukea, which is the teaching telescope up there, is the first one to be decommissioned. I moved through a bill in the Water and Land Committee that would provide funding to do that decommissioning. I'm also very supportive of reinstalling that telescope at Hale Pohaku as a teaching telescope for our students to learn about astronomy. And it would work well at Hale Pohaku, but we would take it off the summit. There needs to be a couple of other observatories on the summit that need to be decommissioned. And there's already one that has been identified, and they're beginning the process for doing that. And there needs to be other ones that will need to be identified. And there's a timeline that needs to happen in. And so, Pohai, you're absolutely right. That process needs to move forward. The university is going to be held responsible for making sure that happens, and that the dismantling, the decommissioning needs to be done with the proper environmental analysis and oversight. And that is a precondition of moving forward with any extension on this lease.
All right, we have a question from Hank. The composition of the working group already shows that if all the Hawaiians voted together, the others would already have one vote more to trump Hawaiians. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, you know, the chair is really supposed to be a neutral facilitator rather than a vote. And frankly, I'm hoping this group doesn't just use voting as a way to do it. I'm hoping that it can use a facilitation process to seek consensus. Personally, I have advocated to the university and the Board of Regents that they choose a Native Hawaiian to be their representative. We happen to have a Native Hawaiian who is a regent from Hawaii Island, and Alapaki Nahalea, and I think he would be a great person to serve on this working group. I hope that the OHA trustee, Lindsay from Hawaii Island, who is the Hawaii Island trustee, is chosen to represent OHA. I think he would be a great person to have there. The Department of Hawaiian Homeland's Commissioner, David Ka'apu, another Native Hawaiian from Hawaii Island, he would be a great person to represent. So I'm really hoping that we can have strong representation of Native Hawaiians from Hawaii Island who can serve as basically the majority of the members on this working group.
Thank you. We have a question from Makana. Why do you feel that most of the working group should be represented by Big Islanders when Mauna Kea is both a state issue as well as provides numerous contributions beyond the beaches of Hawaii Island?
And I appreciate that. And I have to say, it's from my own understanding of Kuleana. It's my own understanding of having people who have their home on the island of Hawaii to be the ones who represent and on the working group. To be candid, I expect that there will be other people on the working group besides Hawaii Island residents. And I think that'll be fine as long as they're the right people who can represent the state interest, statewide interests, because you're right, Mauna Kea is something of statewide significance. Frankly, it's of global significance. And so I don't want to have this, arrogance that only Hawaii Island people can speak for the mountain. But I am advocating for at least as many as possible should be from Hawaii Island. But I acknowledge what you say, and that there are others within the state should be able to speak for the statewide significance of Mauna Kea. So mahalo for your mana'o. I think that's true.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be about the recommendations that come out of the working group. Is there a commitment to follow their recommendations?
So the recommendations from the working group will be provided to the legislature and to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Right now, the Board of Land and Natural Resources has the responsibility for making decisions about Mauna Kea. They have the constitutional authority to do that. So the working group is to provide its report to the Board of Land and Natural Resources, and it's to provide its report to the legislature. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because if the working group makes a recommendation that the new governance structure that they prefer would require statutory authority, that we provide this information soon enough that we can prepare legislation and introduce it in the 2022 legislature. And so once the working group completes its work and its report and presents it to the land board and to the legislature, then we begin the process of implementing that either at the land board level or at the legislative level. And so we certainly will be as a legislator, I'll certainly be pursuing that. And then I'll leave it to the land board to decide what they want to do with that. And we all can be engaged in the land board process through the public participation process.
Okay, we have a question from Colin Kippen. If a new structure is recommended to manage the Mauna, how will it be funded? Will this subject be reviewed as part of the working group's work product?
Absolutely. And aloha to Colin Kippen. I appreciate you being here. Yes, funding is currently provided by the observatories for the Office of Maunakea Management, there are some general funds that are provided for it as well. And so going forward, funding will have to be provided both by the observatories and by the state through the university and through general funding. And this brings up an issue for years, and the currency that has been used to pay for the lease rent on the mountain by the observatories is, rather than paying cash, they pay in observation hours, and that's very valuable. I mean, basically, the time provided to the University of Hawaii to observe in these telescopes and other observatories has been the currency that has allowed the University of Hawaii to become a world-class astronomy scientific center for research and discovery. And that's extremely valuable. But I think the new model will include not just observation time, but also cash payments. I think that's going to be the new model. And it's not just cash payments to the state, but also community benefit packages. So Colin, to your question, I think the funding will definitely be part of any new lease extension going forward. It will be payment for management efforts. It'll be payment for community benefits. It'll be payment for all of the different costs that will be incurred for the proper management of Mauna Kea.
David, I see that Representative Mark Nakashima is on with us now. So you get to be released from the hot seat for a bit. Representative Nakashima, welcome. I'd like to introduce you to everyone, and Representative David Tarnas has been answering all the questions. So I'll bring you up to speed very quickly, and then we'd like to have some questions for you. So Representative Mark Nakashima is chairman of the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. He's a representative from the 1st House District, North Kohala, South Kohala, Hamakua, North Hilo, and South Hilo, and he's vice chair of the House Higher Education Committee. In his past, he has been a staff assistant with U.S. Senator Spark Matsunaga, legislative aide to Representative Dwight Takamine, legislative aide to Representative Eric Hamakawa, a teacher at Honoka'a High School in history and economics, and a staff member with the Hawaii State Teachers Association, West Hawaii and Hilo. So welcome, Representative Nakashima. We allotted 15 minutes for both you and David Tarnas to speak on anything you would like to as to these two resolutions. And then we went into questions. So we have some pending questions, but I'd like to now, if it's okay, Juanita, Chair, I'd like to now open it up the floor for Representative Nakashima to talk about HR33 and HCR41.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm sorry for my tardiness. The resolutions are, I believe, the House's attempt to try and address some of the shortfalls that were identified in the recent review of the Maunakea management, and the fact that a lot of the native Hawaiian voices were not heard or not adhered to. And so the group that was put together is largely is very much a Big Island Native Hawaiian group that we are hoping will help provide guidance to us, as we move forward on the Maunakea management issue.
Okay, we're inviting all the participants to submit questions through the chat. So I'd like to, we've had questions on the composition of the working group, whether it would be funded, what would happen to their recommendations. And I'd like to go to the questions that are now pending. We have 2 participants asking about decommissioning. From Hank, why are the taxpayers paying for the decommissioning of Hokukea? I think that says when it's a university project. And another question from Patricia, we the taxpayers are not supposed to pay for decommissioning. Those who built it are responsible in the lease already. Do you think you could respond to that, Representative Nakashima?
Maybe Mark, I could respond to that just to let you know that it's a University of Hawaii telescope, so it's a public expenditure, and so that's why we're spending public money to decommission it and then also reinstall it because it is a public asset that we'd be using for public education. Chair Nakashima, do you want to add to that?
No, that's kind of what I was going to say as well, because it's a university. Because it's a university telescope, the state is ultimately responsible for the decommissioning of it. And as we move to decommission, we are the ones that are on the hook to do that.
Okay, a question from Pohai Ryan. Is management now requiring decommission and removal as a provision of all leases?
I think that the decommissioning is a standard closure to any of the leases on the mountain. And I think Rep. Tarnas can address that as well.
Yeah, I think decommissioning is going to be, I mean, it was a requirement that the Board of Land and Natural Resources are already placed on the university going forward. So they have a responsibility for identifying which ones will be decommissioned and what schedule, and making sure that they meet all the environmental requirements going forward. And I want to make sure that people understand that, Lanakila brings up, I talk about stakeholders, who are the right holders, who are the ones that have the kuleana, responsibility. And it's really the Native Hawaiians. And that's why we formed this working group, so that the Native Hawaiian voice can have a seat at the table. And the university has acknowledged that they have not been able to fully engage with Native Hawaiian leadership on management of the mountain. And so that's one of the key reasons that the speaker has really pushed for us to form this working group, is so that Native Hawaiian leadership can have a seat at the table, because they are the ones that are the host culture, and this mountain is one that they need to speak for. So I only use the word stakeholder as a term of art, as a facilitator in managing group process, but I acknowledge that the Native Hawaiians are really the ones that we are seeking to get engaged in this process and be the primary voice in this working group.
Thank you. We have a question from Richard Ha. One of the main issues that Ku'iwalu noted in their evaluation of how the comprehensive management plan was implemented was a lack of communication. It appears to be lack of respect. Where is the physical representation of Hawaiian culture? There is none. The DLNR controls the site. Could you please?
Let me just say briefly a response, and Chair Nakashima can pursue it, but that's a very good question. And so this working group needs to provide input as to how should the Native Hawaiian voice be heard and presence be memorialized and established in a permanent fashion. And I'm humble enough to say that I'm not the one to answer that question, but I look to this working group to provide that input because I think it's important. And just to mention that the Board of Land and Natural Resources is the lead agency on managing the mountain, because that's what the Hawaii Constitution has identified. You know, the Board of Land and Natural Resources has the authority to manage the mountain. And it's up to this working group, I think, to provide advice and counsel to the board as to how best to manage it. And if the legislature needs to change the statutes in order to do it better, then the working group needs to make that recommendation to the legislature. Chair Nakashima, let me turn it to you.
You know, as we discussed the issues with the different groups that were on the mountain, you know, part of the difficulty, I think, was that there were several different and divergent issues that the groups brought up. So, you know, the group was not speaking to me with one voice, and that created some of the difficulty in trying to deal with the numerous issues that were brought up. Now, some of the issues that were brought up, you know, I am now trying to deal with, such as you know, having the native wines put onto the land, and you know, looking at trying to better compensate for the needs of OHA and DHHL. So, you know, those are the issues that to me were brought up as part of the discussions that we are trying to work on.
All right. I know you addressed Lanakita's question, David, so I'll go to the next one. This is from Hank. The master lease ends in 2033. Decommissioning takes at least 10 years. Is it the intent that there is going to be an extended lease?
Open question, and I think that's what
We can't hear you. Can't hear you. Is your volume low? Are you speaking into the microphone?
the university is asking the land board for an extension. The university is asking the land board to extend their lease. It is not a foregone conclusion that that will happen. The observatories who are on the mountain are wanting that to happen so that they could continue to invest and continue their operations. But decommissioning is already been required by the land board of the university for their existing responsibilities. So even if there is no extension, they still have to decommission. You know, I think if you read the plan presented by Greg Chun to the land board, in fact, it's Benton Pang has put in the chat box the 2010 decommissioning plan. There's that plan plus some updates that have been provided. So the decommissioning is going to happen. They're identifying which observatories are going to be decommissioned. That is something that's going to happen.
Okay, our next question is from Abe Correa. What is the vision plan after the working group is in place, and what steps are required moving forward?
Maybe I could answer first, and then I'll turn it over to Mark. You know, I'm hoping that this working group can present its recommendation to the legislature and to the land board as to how to manage the mountain. It's the governance structure that we're focusing on. As to the vision of the future, I would urge you to take a look at what the university is proposing for their vision of the future. the land board is the one that has to decide what will be the vision that will be implemented. And so, you know, everybody here on this call really needs to be involved. We all are interested and engaged, and I would urge you to be involved. Contact Greg Chun, be part of his process. Nominate yourselves or get people to nominate you to be part of this working group so you can be part of that. We're creating the vision now, and that's part of our challenge. And I'm asking everyone who wants to be involved to step up and put their name forward so you can be part of shaping that vision. Chair Nakajima, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just agree with my colleague regarding the what the vision is. The vision is something I think we need to revisit and build upon as we move forward. And I don't think that at this moment it's set in stone.
I'd like to make an observation of more items in the chat box. Maunakea is asking a legal question. I'll just put it out there, but I don't think it would be appropriate for us to expect you to answer it. So by law, are stakeholders and right holders considered equal? Patricia is saying, would Subaru build on Mount Fuji? I'm throwing these out as things to think about. And Bradford Lum is saying our kupuna should be on the table as the working group. We've scheduled this Zoom discussion till 7:30. Are there any more questions or discussion, or would either of our guest speakers like to say more?
Mark, I'll defer to you first, and I'd be happy to say a few more words, but let me defer to you first.
Oh yeah, Rep. Titus and I work closely with the speaker on the crafting of this particular resolution. And what we tried to do is to create a group that wasn't too big, but would come with a diversity of views and opinions as we move forward. And so, one of the things that we did want to do is to try and honor the fact that the Native Hawaiian voice felt it was not being heard, and that this is the chance for that voice to speak loudly and come forward. And so, we look forward to the deliberations of the group, and hope that we do have a result from it.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mark. And I just got to say that, this working group is really born out of recognition that we needed to have a forum for Native Hawaiian leaders to speak up and share their mana'o about the future of Maunakea. We all know that there are observatories on Maunakea. It's a premier site for astronomy. We've all heard about the great benefits of astronomy on Maunakea because of its unique characteristics. And I have my own personal opinion about what I'd like to see on Maunakea, but this working group isn't about me. It's about providing a chance for the Native Hawaiian voices to present their vision of the future of Maunakea, recognizing its role that it could play for the Native Hawaiian community, recognizing the role that Maunakea could play for astronomy, science, and so that's really what this working group is about, is to provide that opportunity for the Native Hawaiian voice to be heard. And so I'm not drawing any pre-conclusions as to what the results will be from this. I will certainly, if I'm asked, I'd be happy to be part of this working group. It's up to the speaker. And I trust Speaker Psyche. I'll advise him. And I know he has a number of Native Hawaiian leaders who are advising him as to who to select among all the different nominees. But I hear, Hank, what you're saying. Lanakila, I hear what you're saying. And others who are in this group. You know, Patricia and others, there's frustration because if people feel like the Native Hawaiian voice has not been heard. And that's really where this working group, that's the motivation for forming this working group, is to provide the forum for the Native Hawaiian community to express their opinion and have it be in a effective way. So I welcome everyone's participation. If you're interested or you know people who you think would be good to serve on this working group, please have them be nominated. The process is very open. Send in their nomination, and you know, I hope we have a really strong group and that we would be able to work over the next, you know, rest of this year, and we produce our report at the end of this year. And so that's the plan.
Okay, Chair Juanita, would you like to close our session?
Yes, I will. Hold on just a minute. So again, mahalo Rep. Tarnas and Rep. Nakashima. We appreciate the informative presentation. Be assured that the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus will be tracking the HCR33 HD1 and participating in legislative hearings. Thank you for your leadership on behalf of the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And mahalo to all of you who have participated in this evening's gathering. We hope that you have found the information provided at this forum informative and that you will have your voice heard at the legislature. The Hawaiian Affairs Caucus will be holding our next general membership meeting and will predominantly focus on the 31st Hawaii State Legislature of 2021 bills and rezos on Wednesday, April 14th at 6 p.m. And if you're interested in attending, give us your email address in the chat box and we will send you the invitation and Zoom link. So again, HAC, Democratic Party of Hawaii, will be sending in nominations for the Maunakea Working Group. And if there are any HAC, Democratic Party of Hawaii members or Democratic Party of Hawaii members who are interested, or you would like to nominate to be a part of the Maunakea Working Group, please email hacdphluna@gmail.com no later than March 31st, 2021 by 5 p.m. So mahalo everyone for attending. And thank you again so much to our representatives, David and Mark, for being a part of sharing your mana'o with our community. Malama pono and ahui ho.
Mahalo. Aloha.
Mahalo.